Greetings, my fellow Motorcynicists Brothers. In this video, the third in the series on the attention economy, we will discuss a dystopian response to a pseudo-democracy and the political debate between the destitute and the dispossessed. A warm welcome to another video on the channel. A dystopian response to a pseudo-democracy. China's approach to technology addiction reflects a state vision that prioritizes collective discipline and public health over individual digital leisure freedoms. Since 2008, when the country became a pioneer in classifying internet addiction as a clinical disorder, a social consensus consolidated that excessive screen use is modern electronic opium, capable of destabilizing families and compromising the productivity of the future workforce. This background drove the creation of a vast network of rehabilitation centers, operating under a logic of drastic intervention, often located in the gray zone between corrective education and military medical treatment. Unlike Western rehabilitation clinics, which tend to focus on cognitive behavioral therapies, Chinese camps frequently adopt a military-style regime. In these locations, teenagers and young adults are subjected to grueling routines of physical exercise, facility cleaning, and drills, under the premise that physical exhaustion and strict discipline can cleanse the mind of digital dependency. Isolation is absolute. Inmates are deprived of any electronic device, and in many cases brought to these institutions without prior notice through forced transportation services hired by their own parents. This dynamic reveals a deep generational fracture in social desperation, where technology is seen as an insurmountable barrier to academic success and filial obedience. However, the efficacy and ethics of these methods are targets of severe criticism and international controversy. Although the Chinese government officially banned extreme practices like electroshock therapy in 2009, reports of physical and psychological abuse continue to emerge from less regulated institutions. Tragedies involving deaths from exhaustion or beatings brought to light the lack of medical standardization in these camps, many of which operate more as detention centers than health units. Despite this, demand for these services remains high, sustained by a culture that values immediate results and compliance with rigid social norms. Recently, the Chinese strategy evolved from a merely corrective response to a systemic preventive stance. The state implemented regulations drastically limiting online gaming time for minors and compelling tech companies to use facial recognition systems to enforce compliance. Thus, detox camps ceased to be the sole line of defense, becoming part of a broader ecosystem of state control over digital life. This reality highlights a governance model that does not hesitate to intervene in the private sphere to shape youth behavior, transforming what began as a health concern into a matter of national security and public order. The political debate between the destitute and the deprived. The political debate in a society driven by attention poverty and emotional dependency ceases to be an exercise in rational deliberation and becomes a spectacle of affective manipulation and cognitive simplification. When citizens' capacity for focus is fragmented and their internal stability depends on constant digital stimuli, the process of choosing leaders is severely compromised, as the average voter lacks the stamina required to analyze complex government plans or dense biographical trajectories. In this setting, public debate is reduced to a succession of sound bites, catchphrases, and personal attacks designed to pierce the wall of disinterest through shock. The immediate consequence is the rise of political figures who master the grammar of social media, digital populism, where a candidate's effectiveness is measured not by the viability of their proposals, but by their skill in generating emotional engagement, whether through euphoria, fear, or resentment. The selection of leaders becomes guided by salience bias, in which the loudest, most ubiquitous candidate eclipses the technical manager or the moderate lawmaker. In an emotionally dependent society, political leaders are frequently elevated to messianic status or saviors, whose role is not to administer the state, but to validate the anxieties and prejudices of their electorate. This creates a vicious cycle of affective polarization. Because attention spans are short, politicians must radicalize their discourse to keep their audience alert and loyal. Political debate stops being about the common good and becomes about maintaining a group identity fed by artificial crises. The result is the election of leaders with low administrative capability, but high capacity for entertainment and mobilization. yielding erratic public management driven by daily controversies that serve only to feed the attention economy while structural national problems remain neglected. Furthermore, the weakening of critical thinking resulting from attentional poverty renders the electorate vulnerable to disinformation and post-truth narratives. In an environment where feeling precedes fact, truth becomes an aesthetic accessory. Voters choose to believe the lie that best comforts their emotional state or best attacks their adversary. This dynamic corrodes the foundations of democracy, as voting ceases to be an instrument of social accountability and performance evaluation, becoming instead an act of affective consumption. In the long run, the consequence for society is the erosion of institutions. Since leaders chosen under the logic of superficial agility and digital narcissism tend to govern for the algorithm rather than for history, prioritizing immediate image gains over democratic sustainability and genuine national development. Very well. We've reached the end of this video dedicated to the philosophical and sociological analysis of themes relevant to modernity. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button. If not, I'm still grateful you made it this far. If you feel something was left out or presented incorrectly, or if you'd like to share your own point of view, please leave a comment. It would be most welcome. If topics like this interest you, please consider subscribing to the channel. See you in the next video. A fraternal farewell to all my Motorcynicists brothers.
Lantern in hand,